Mustafa, thank you so much for attending this event. Thank you so much for organizing this.
Oh, of course, Mansoor. It's a pleasure and an honor. I'm very happy to finally meet you after having been a big fan of the book. So
Thank you so much. Yeah.
So Mansoor, when we get started in 1 second, Mustafa and I'll tell you the classes that we teach and who our students are.
Yeah, that's
who are attending this session. It's a very broad range of interests and students from kind of different backgrounds. So it's very, very exciting.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you now, just before we get started, my class.
Sorry, I missed the call yesterday. Sorry, guys. Yeah, go ahead.
It's okay.
Oh, that's Adish. So my class is an undergraduate post-colonial literature and theory class. They're here. They're waving to you, but you can't see them on that side of the screen. And yeah, we're very excited. It's been we just finished reading Frantz Fanon, so Wretched of the Earth. So we have some sense of struggles and difficulties of that match imperial projects. So I think that should be a good segue into your experiences too.
Right, and I teach in the Department of Health and Nutrition Sciences, and my my class is mostly public health majors, and so the class that I'm teaching this semester now is health activism, and we're talking a lot about broad systems of oppression that lead to inequities, racial, gender, sexual orientation, and then we look at kind of how through collective action and struggle, we get to achieve our wins.
Yes.
And why social justice is really important in the context of health and public health in particular, especially now that we've just lived or continue to live through this particular health crisis, right? What does that look like on the ground, and what do we need to do all together from a public health perspective to reverse and especially the inequities when it comes to health outcomes.
Okay, I think we should probably get started. What do you think?
Yes, please.
Okay. That means we're going to get started. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon and welcome. This is the Wolfe Institute event of November 7th, 2022. Don't forget us here, Mansoor Adayfi and Antonio Aiello on surviving Guantanamo Bay. This is the book, by the way. Here we have the book. I'm very pleased to have with us Mansoor and Antonio. Let me begin first, just to get some commentaries out of the way. Brooklyn College is located on land that is traditional and unceded territory of the Canarsie and Nyack Lenape people. Land enriched by the blood of enslaved Africans, we, the Brooklyn College community, acknowledge that academic institutions, indeed the nation state itself, was founded upon and continues to enact exclusions and erasures of Indigenous and Black peoples. This acknowledgement demonstrates a commitment to beginning the process of working to dismantle ongoing practices and legacies of settler colonialism and to recognize the hundreds of Indigenous nations who continue to resist and live on these lands. We pay our respect to Indigenous and other elders past, present, and future. First, I want to thank our co-sponsors for today's event, and that includes the English department, the History department, the Political Science department, the Puerto Rican and Latino Studies department, Health and Nutritional Sciences department, the American Studies program, Students for Justice in Palestine, the Brooklyn College Islamic Society, Bridges for Yemen, and of course, the FLR Wolfe Institute for the Humanities. I am Mustafa Adayfi. I'm a professor here in the Department of English. And I also want to thank Anna Georgievich, who is from the Health and Nutrition Science Department, for helping organize this event. And I invite you to a conversation with Mansoor Adayfi and Antonio Aiello. Briefly, some introductions. Antonio Aiello is a writer, editor, and artist working at the intersection of human rights advocacy and the creative arts to help tell important stories from the margins of society. As content director and strategist for organizations like PEN America and the Barred Prison Initiative, He has developed, written and produced multimedia content to give voice to issues of social justice and writers in peril around the world. He worked closely with Mansoor to transform manuscripts written at Guantanamo into his memoir, Don't Forget Us Here, Lost and Found at Guantanamo. Also, the graphic narratives for the NIB and Guantanamo Voices, and the Audible series Letters from Guantanamo. Together with Adayfi, he was a Sundance Institute Fellow at Episodic TV to work on their limited series television show From Guantanamo with Love, which is in development. And we have coming to us from Serbia, Mansoor Adayfi, who is a writer, artist, and former Guantanamo prisoner held for 14 years without charges. What was your ISN, Mansoor?
Oh, 441 or 441.
441, yes. Everybody knows their number that they were assigned very clearly. He was released to Serbia in 2016, where he struggles to make a new life for himself and to shed the designation of suspected terrorists. Adayfi has published several New York Times pieces, including a modern love column. He is a frequent guest speaker about Guantanamo and prisoner rights and has appeared on MSNBC, Al Jazeera, NPR's The Takeaway, Democracy Now!, and others. He contributed to the graphic anthology Guantanamo Voices and the scholarly volume Witnessing Torture. And he participated in the creation of the award-winning radio documentary, The Art of Now, Guantanamo, for BBC Radio and for the CBC podcast, Love Me, which aired on Radiolab in 2019. Adayfi won the Richard J. Margolis Award for Nonfiction Writers of Social Justice Journalism, and his memoir, Don't Forget Us Here, Lost and Found at Guantanamo, was released in August 2021, and, congratulations, won the 2022 Evelyn Shakir Nonfiction Award for the Arab American Book Award. He is also a Sundance Institute Fellow in Episodic TV to develop the limited series television show From Guantanamo with Love. So today, what we're going to do is we're going to engage our guests in a conversation until I think around 12:50 or so. Sorry, 1:50 or so, I should say. At which point, then we're going to ask for questions from the audience, whether in person or on Zoom. So be prepared to be already thinking about questions that you might want to ask to our guests, and we'll give you an opportunity near the end. So let's just jump right in. First of all, I want to again thank you for coming. Also, be aware that we are recording this event, just so you all know. I also want to ask you to, if you are going to use the chat function in the on Zoom, to use it judiciously, please. Thank you. All right, let us begin. Let's talk first of all to Antonio, if that's okay. And I'd really like to ask Antonio if it would be possible for you, Antonio, to help us understand, the origins of Guantanamo Bay as a penal colony, really, for the war on terror. This is something that I think many of us are familiar with who work in this arena, but if you don't work in this arena, then after so many years, it starts to lose, I think, that same sense of knowledge, of being such a big part of the American present right now. So maybe you could help by framing what Guantanamo is and why it, in fact, is still around.
Sure. So I think, to set the stage, I think, it's been 21 years since Guantanamo opened, and I think it's important to go back even further to September 11th, 2001, when the terrorist attacks happened. And I think that was such a devastating blow to the United States at that time. And it really it united a population who was deeply divided at the time after the Bush administration took office. And it united them to, fight a common cause, which was terrorism. And so Guantanamo opened really after the start of the Afghanistan war as a detention facility that was intended to immediately detain and figure out who was being detained and then try them for war crimes and swiftly execute the punishment, which I think they had thought of, that they were actually going to execute people and get rid, and kind of clear the slate and get retribution for 9/11. Well, what happened was that because they had dropped flyers and had basically bought most of the prisoners at Guantanamo, they ended up with hundreds of men who were sold to the United States for bounty money. Farmers, students, aid workers, drug addicts, like anyone who could be sold. And so, within a matter of months of opening, the military generals knew that Guantanamo was filled with people who had no intelligence value, but they had all of these men. And so that's kind of what started Guantanamo. And from there, it just kind of like snowballed. I think, how do you justify holding hundreds of men for so many years without cause? I think you create a narrative that they're the worst of the worst prisoners and that there's a reason for holding them. And so I think Guantanamo existed to kind of feed the fear that America was fighting the war on terror and that we were holding terrorists accountable, and that's where they were being held, at Guantanamo. I think it's important to note that not until 2006, when high-value detainees were transferred from CIA black sites around the world to Guantanamo, was when actually Guantanamo held terrorist suspects. Until then, it was mostly, people who had nothing to do with, any sort of terrorist acts like Mansoor. And I think so the history of Guantanamo is pretty jaded from the beginning, and it was a mistake. And I think a lot of people recognize that. And I think, to hand it off to Mansoor, he's the one who was swept up in that. And I think he's a great example. And this is why his memoir is so important, is because it shows who was there, how old they were, and how they had to, fight for survival against a pretty strong military and a pretty strong campaign against them.
Thank you. And in fact, Mansoor, you were one of the first waves of people brought to Guantanamo, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
First of all, I would like to thank you, Mustafa, Anna, and Antonio, and everyone who attend this event today. And I would like to welcome you all, guys. First of all, thank you, Antonio, because I have been torturing his ass for the last 3 years about Guantanamo. Sorry for sometimes he's bad words. Anyway, I was like the second or the third group when I was taken to the unknown, basically. So yes.
Did you know where you were when you landed there?
Here's the thing, let me just start talking about Guantanamo. Are we going to go back to Antonio before going back to him? At the age of 18 years old, I was sold to the CIA as Al-Qaeda commander, not an insider, which they thought they have this kind of big fish. And the truth on the ground was that the more the Afghanis, the Pakistani told the CIA we have big rank, the more they get 6 figures, 60 figures for the amount they got. So sometimes they would keep detainees for in prison that they grow beard and hair, and they sold them to the CIA. This Al-Qaeda commander, this Taliban commander, and the CIA was their job to collect as much people and sold them to Guantanamo, and ship them to Guantanamo, where they will be sort the files and who is who. I spent 3 months in the black site, the worst for the worst. So basically, then to Kandahar, where when I arrived the first time, they asked me to sign a paper that if I tried to escape, they would kill me. I said, no, I'm not signing that. So anyway, it's kind of stupid and funny at the same time. Spent 25 days there. Then when we were in Kandahar, we had no idea to where we are going. And one of the doctors, he was a really nice doctor. He was I think Army or Navy, and he said, look, I'm not allowed to do anything, but you're going to move to a place better than here, because the situation in Kandahar was really bad. And he was very sympathetic, and that he was telling us always that shouldn't happen to you guys. I'm sorry, and so on. So we felt, seeing his face at that place give us some comfort that everything will be okay, but it wasn't okay. Then they used to come us in the middle of the night calling the numbers. And as soon as we see the cargo, huge plane, cargo plane, we knew that some people will leave. They ship us to Guantanamo. When we arrived there, we had no idea where we were or what would happen to us, and until one going to stay. It just, when they took the hood of my head, I couldn't see only fences, ocean of orange jumpsuits, and just you could see the guards shouting, yelling at everyone, don't talk, don't look at me, shut up, and this kind of try to scare you. So for us,
this was in X-ray. This was at Camp.
Yeah, at Camp X-ray. So for us, it was too much to process what happened to you, because everything happened so fast, and at that age, like you don't understand what's going on there, especially if you are being shipped, hooded, gagged, everything, like all your senses covered, and like what would happen
Yeah.
to us? They're going to
And
execute us.
you were how old at this point?
I turned 19 in the black side. So when I arrived at Guantanamo, I was 19 years old. So
And tell us
what-
how you got, because since you're from Yemen, how was it that you were in Afghanistan?
People in Afghanistan, there are all kind of people in Afghanistan. Some, it's like a country where people travel. And we were there had like a research mission for one of the scholars who wanted to write a book about a new Islamic group, about Qaeda, about jihad, and so on. And we were there to Afghanistan because at that time there was no Google, no Mr. Google, there was no internet in Yemen, and so on. Our job just to research and to go to interview some people and to get materials, books, cassettes. There were no CDs at that time. And this was our job basically. And one of the things, I had like a notebook. I wrote a lot of names, numbers, locations, and that makes in my life even worse. So this basically was our job. And at Guantanamo, when we arrived there, it just like what made things worse, that prisoners told us in the United States, if people wore an orange jumpsuit, it means like execution. Interrogators told us the same thing: you are going to be killed because nobody knows about you here, and we're going to interrogate you and going to kill you. And yeah, I mean, yes. So this is the first time when we arrived at Guantanamo. I mean, yeah, it was like total loss. And also, we are talking about 50 nationalities, over 20 languages spoken. At the same time, we had no shared life before Guantanamo, but like what's important. So like we didn't know each other. So it was really hard and difficult, try to break the barriers. There's like trust issues, and it was really hard and difficult. And the treatment, the situation, even the guards, there wasn't any kind of like, Guantanamo is not a place, like it's not like a place would include in the prison system where there's like rules, there is some kind of a setup, there's some kind of a structure. It was no rules at all. And even we felt they didn't know what to do with us. Every day they have new rules, just intense interrogations, and FBI, CIA, all kind of crazy view, like they told you like we are MI, like what's mean MI? Even like, oh, military intelligence. Okay. And everyone would like to interrogate you as much as they want, and there was also no coordination between them. Some of them like treat you bad, some of them like treat you good, some of them drag you in the middle of the night, sometimes get three interrogations the same day with different 3 groups or 5 groups. So it was a big mess. So yeah.
And I'm just curious, the scarf that you wear, it seems like it's also the orange color of the jumpsuits. Is that on purpose?
Oh yeah, this is my friend orange color. So we decide to be friend at Guantanamo, after Guantanamo. Here's the thing, colors, numbers, places, they are not bad. It's our actions, we define them to be bad, and the orange color, I think, is a beautiful color. But for the recent years, it's become like, orange color wearing only for specific people, like it's come like racism. So when I was in Guantanamo, I said, I have decided to make peace with Guantanamo, but Guantanamo hasn't decided to make peace with me, actually, because it's still open till that day. Mm-hmm. So, as victims of Guantanamo, I didn't think we should be shy or should be hide, because that what most prisoners, 99% of prisoners, tried to hide because they were in Guantanamo, because the stigma of Guantanamo. Try to change, some of them change their names, some of them because Guantanamo hunts you everywhere you go, trust me. But for me, I said, you know what, just keep doing this because it's really important, because they're still open. And we are fighting the idea behind Guantanamo, the Guantanamo itself. The idea of oppression, injustice, lawlessness, abuse of power, indefinite detention. Guantanamo was created outside of the law, outside of the justice system, outside of our humanity. It's not about those prisoners there. It's about them, but it's about us all. So Guantanamo should be used to fight the injustice around the world too. So it's kind of hard to keep doing this, especially after Guantanamo. But someone has to stand, and it's like that we did at Guantanamo, because many of the prisoners choose not to do anything. Only if you try to stand and to fight back and to resist and to fight the injustice within Guantanamo.
Well, let's talk about that because I think the book is actually full of all kinds of moments of collective action, of resistance, of organizing while inside of a situation which is, meant to try to defeat all of that at the same time. So, I wonder if you can talk about some of the maybe the more difficult moments when you were in Guantanamo over all of those years, and the ways that you also, as an individual and as a group, fought back against that same kind of dehumanization.
The book, yeah, let's go to the book. The book, the first name of the book I chose, Guantanamo, was Moments from Guantanamo. And, when I start writing it, people said, why are we writing? Even there's a lot of book has been written. And so I said, you know what? I need to write something different, something. I think Antonio noticed that when I sent him the manuscript, with the attitude of Guantanamo. So, about one of the hardest moments at Guantanamo first was seeing some of the brothers died there, mysteriously died at Guantanamo. This is actually one of the hardest moments ever at Guantanamo for me. And also, it's kind of hard, even when I left Guantanamo, I was crying because, those men left in a box and I'm free. So we fought together, that we were close friends. And none of us had a thought to commit suicide because, it's forbidden even to think about it and so on. The struggle started early, especially there was no limitations to what they can do to us there. At first was chaos. Then when General Jeffrey Miller arrived by the end of 2002, it turned it into organized chaos, basically. He is the first one who wrote the camp SOP, standard operation procedure. Crazy guy, anyway. Trust me, if you look at him, it just anyway. So, and he started, really torture from the. He started interrogation again, and start the torture. They were experimenting on the prisoners there. They divided camps into different camps, different set of rules, and different set of treatment. And started really intense interrogation with that. With the intense interrogation was also the torture started. This was and we at the beginning, we're just fighting, not fighting back, reacting to whatever they threw at us, because it's kind of hard to organize everyone. It's kind of really hard to convince everyone to do something about it. And you have different kind of mindsets, different kind of prisoners, countries. So I can tell you the one who stood that the tribal people who come from the tribe background, because still this kind of dignity, honor, transparency, and whatever. So I was also one of the most outstanding prisoners, speaking loud, talking to everyone. Now what we did in our tribe, basically, because you didn't have speakers, you didn't have whatever, just talk to the people. Hey guys, we need and Americans very smart. They watching everyone who is talking, who is trying to do something, and I would decide an instigator. And from that, we started, with the hunger strike, because it's the first time I heard about hunger strike at Guantanamo. So I thought it's fasting. So we can fast. The first day was easy, and I was very stubborn. I said, I'm going to even stop water. The second day was hell because it was really hot. The second day I was oh Allah, have mercy on me, because I cannot stop, because I already promised my brothers I will kill you. As you know, as tribesmen, you cannot break your word. You can't. It's just in our blood that way. So I struggled for 9 days. They used to take me to give me IVs. Then we experienced the hunger strike, but that's first experience was okay, we get some victory here. We had one of the first general who come to negotiate with us. Then we started from there. But when General Jeffrey Miller arrived, things get worse. And they're very smart, in breaking your hunger strike, not to show your results, and it takes a lot of time to talk to the people. They brought those big generators to stop us from communicating, big fans, and vacuums. I mean, they have they just, you cannot beat them. They have everything. You have nothing, basically. They can leave you naked in your cell, not just naked, they can make your life hell there. So everything was about control, but we didn't give up. We try, like, the more you fight with them, the more we learn more. The more, like, okay, the more you stay, the more also you know how the system works. And if you know how the system works, you know how to go around it, basically. But you need a lot of energy, you need a lot of time, you need a lot of patience, and numbers what matters. But most of the prisoners, you know, not everyone like can fight for so long. So from that we started, you know, tried to stop the torture, stop the mistreatment, you know, respect to our religion, and especially when you see, like, there was no medical treatment and very little food. Also, if you got punished, they used to punish in food too. We got at least 2 small bars twice a day, and it was, and put us in very cold cells. And that, yeah, it was like hard, but even that forged us into something crazier, you know. We become, okay, didn't care anymore. Some would stop eating at all, like, and they have to come give us IV or force feed us, and it become our life like that, you know, between those punishment for hunger strike. So our hunger strike never stopped. Like, we use it as a way to resist, a way to fight back, a way to survive. You know, you are dying, but with your way of dying, you try to survive, because that was the only way. You know, maybe it's some contradiction, but none of us want to die by hunger strike. But basically, imagine they left us like for 40 days or 70 days or 60 days only in IVs or water. Literally, some of us went down until like 84 pounds. It was literally that. They took me to the intensive care in 2013, spent 3 days. I was dying, literally. So, but it was only our way to survive at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
So also, this is one of the struggle. It wasn't also not just 1 month or 1 year or 2 years, like over a decade. Even when things get better, there was a fear always something would change, because they keep changing the administration, change the guards, the rules, and there is uncertainty. And there is also, because there is no rules at all, there is no any kind, like, you didn't have any kind of rights or something you can argue with them. When you argue, it's like, you have nothing here. Whatever we give you, it's out of courtesy. You didn't deserve even to live.
There was a sense that in the beginning, when Obama was elected, that maybe things would be different, right? Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, like, yes, in 2008, by then we heard there's a black guy. He was like, oh, he's going to close Guantanamo, and you know, Saifullah Bracha, who gets released, he said he's going to close Guantanamo, and okay, we support him. So we're like, sometimes arguing with the guards, your next boss will be black guy, because this like come also some kind of war between us and some of the guards, not all the guards. So just to clear one thing, you know, I believe even Guantanamo, those guards, or most of them, were also victims of Guantanamo, because Guantanamo never left anyone without untouched or scratch. Yeah, Guantanamo was attached to our humanity as prisoners or guards or campus staff whatsoever. So basically, we hope that he would win and would close Guantanamo. He did one, but he didn't close Guantanamo, and the big problem. So at that time, we were on force feeding. Like, they used to force feed us twice a day, because we were on hunger strikes in 2007. And you know, the day he won, it's become like a celebration in the camps. So after 6 months, we knew it's not going to close the detention, because there wasn't any kind of movement for the closure of the detention, because you could see it, and like some instructions, some at least there was still releasing some prisoners. Like, and I told my brother, it's not gonna happen. I wish, to be honest with you, but I felt deep it's not gonna happen in 1 year. And 2010, when Obama found out he wanted to close the detention, he sent some kind of delegation to Guantanamo to make it more or better or beautiful, whatever. We met with them. Then we start negotiating with the administration about improvement in the camps, about, you know, the living condition, communal living, phone calls with our families, education, better food, better healthcare. I think like they met most of our what we asked for, but also that takes time to happen, because they had also the they had orders from the White House. They must do some changes. So they call it like the golden age, as you see in the book. So from that, and yeah, Obama failed to close the detention, and his failure since until that day.
Mm-hmm. Is that also the period when people started taking art classes and there was more sort of communal living and you know, maybe talk about the sort of creative life that you could also have at a place like Guantanamo, which is itself a testament of the human spirit.
You know, it was so crazy. Yesterday, they would treat us like really bad, you know, in solitary confinement, orange jumpsuit, sometimes short punishments. When we start negotiating with them, because they said we don't negotiate with prisoners. You are a terrorist. It's like it's rule. We don't negotiate with terrorists. The second day when they given orders, we sit at the tables, hands free, and they were shaking our hands. I was laughing so hard because I always being sarcastic. I said, I'm like, okay, now you're negotiating with the terrorists. I said, come on, let us be friends. I said, okay. So we start negotiating about this stuff, and a matter of like weeks, everything turned upside down. Communal living, TVs, newspaper, library, books, refrigerators, microwave, PlayStation, PS3. It's just crazy. I'm like, guys, what was that about yesterday? Like, why like the mistreatment and solitary confinement and so on? And we stopped the hunger strike because we told them, if things improve, we're going to stop our hunger strike because we know that negotiating to get out from Guantanamo, it's not in their hands. But at least we asked for the moon to get the ceiling, basically. But also our brother was so tired and we need some time to, because it has been like 8 years. We had some peace in the communal living, you know, 20 hours free. And, you know, guards treatment had changed. Even the way they used to talk to them, because they had every morning like a meeting. Before they had instructions to be bad and so on. In 2010, start like, you know, those guys, we don't know who are they, so treat them as humans. We become friendly with the guards. Guards become very friendly about exchange gifts, contrabands, and you name it. Of course, camp administration knows, but they want to calm us down. Then we started the art classes, negotiate with art classes, English classes, and so on. And what they call the golden age, you know, people started have some peace, people process, especially me, like I talk about myself, like in 2010, I was afraid of the person I become, like, and I didn't want to become that person because violence in a way that when you have been fighting for so long, you know, it changes you. You become like angry, become like violence, you become like shouting, because you have been living for this for years and years. And I said, like, I need to focus more on myself. So I started focusing reading, learning English, art classes. Also, now the fight with the current administration took another turn, which actually trying to make things better, but it become harder because now you try to balance the peace between the prisoners and the guards, and this is the worst and hard job ever because nobody trusts you, everyone accuses you, and you have everyone like look at you and like that you try to, you know, to help the other side. So keep that balance and peace. It was really hard and difficult, but we managed, alhamdulillah. So from that, like you can see the fruit. I wrote my book, my first draft. I learned English. I taught others and met with lawyers, and we developed very relationship with the camp administration, with guards, and you know, it feels so wrong because, you know, like the way they did to us, and it was like, what was that about? And it hurt so much, you know. And we could see even when the guards become themselves the camp staff, they would come to apologize, and it's not our country, you know, it's like whatever. So at that, many prisoners took art classes and they start painting, and as you see, there is a lot of painting, and those art class was really important to us all because, you know, art connected to yourself, to your memories, to your previous life. It was our way to escape being in jail and, you know, being kept for so long in solitary confinement for years and years. It is like you would start constructing new life and new memories and new you, basically, and your old life and memories would start like disappear, all distance from you. when we start making arts, we start painting the things we missed most, like sky, the ocean, the trees, the flowers, you know, sometimes the food, families, the home, and so on. So see our friend who accompany us there all the time. So this kind of we try to find again to survive in the environment, because one of the things that scares me at Guantanamo, because before Guantanamo, I told you we had no shared life. Then we start building a shared life together, like new relationship, new memories, new connections. We become part of each other's life. But that only in the environment of Guantanamo, about the hunger strike, the torture, you know, this kind of memories only connected to that place. And they used to separate us all the time between 2002 and 2010. When we met again in the communal living, now we start to talk again, like, oh, I remember you, Mustafa, you were in that camp. Like, nothing connects us, only those memories which we had together and the shared life we built. So we thought we have some freedom, but actually we were going to relive this imprisonment again by these memories, because that face reminded of hunger strike, that face reminded of the torture, that face, and we start talking about our life, the brother who died, the brother who lived, the brother who get married, and the funny moon, the bad guard, the good guards. That's what we have together, basically. So nothing connects us to the world outside, because we are not connected before that. So that make us like go deeper and deeper in our imprisonment. But okay, I think I am the only one who felt it that way. So we started. We knew, like, deep in our heart, we needed to do something to get out from there. But at the same time, like, what can we do? And there's like also fear among, not a fear, kind of, nobody wants to go back to the old days, because, you know, nobody would like to end up like being stripped naked, torture, or solitary confinement. One of the funny parts, the interrogation changed in 2010. That they built a new building, and the rooms become like a guest house. Like, there is like couch, TV, microwave, games, and there is like small refrigerator, and the guards would come, oh, my friend, like, bring you food and play with you, talk to you. I said, you're crazy Americans. You're fucking crazy. Yesterday they were kicking our ass. Today they bring with the food, with the sweet. And if you go to that, it was like, become like volunteering to go to interrogations. And if you go, you get monthly $300, not in cash, but they give you some incentive items. So everything could change. We were just laughing at ourselves and the American, like, we're just kids fighting each other here.
But you know, the other thing that story reminds me of, or that it sparks in me, is this. You say that, you know, you made friends with the people, you had a lot of camaraderie with the people there, but at the same time it reminded you of being in prison. And yet, even after you've left Guantanamo, even after being released, it seems to me from the outside that there's a deep sense of camaraderie and brotherhood among the people who used to be at Guantanamo. Is that true? Maybe you can describe what that situation is like, what that feeling is like.
Yeah, I mean, not just not with prisoners, with guards, camp staff, lawyers, and so on. Because the hardship, the difficulties of Guantanamo sometimes forge some kind of like really strong brotherhood and friendship among prisoners, or between prisoners and guards. There's like a love story between female guards and detainees. I wish I was one of them anyway. So basically, because when you live with people for 10 or 15 years, or 20 years, those become part of your life, part of who you are. And Guantanamo, whether we like it or not, part of our life, shaped our memory, our minds, our thinking, maybe shaped our life anyway. So yes, until after Guantanamo, we have like 3 WhatsApp groups now, former Guantanamo prisoners. There is some people who didn't want to be in that group, because that person, that group, like similar with Guantanamo, it's just the same mentality. Because in Guantanamo, we have some brothers, oh, I don't want to be in that block, because there is some people I don't like be with. So we have like 3 WhatsApp groups, because though people want to have like group now with that group. So basically the same mentality, the same way of thinking. So yeah, and we still communicate. Some of the prisoners choose not to communicate at all, they want to move on with their life, but most of us still communicating and talking about problems, and sometimes singing, sometimes making fun of each other, and mostly share their families, kids, photos, and so on. Yeah, it's even with some of the guards, I have been contacted so far with 3 of the guards who were in Guantanamo, and yeah, we were friends too. So I still in contact with my lawyers and so on.
Yeah. What was it like when you first met the lawyers? Because it was through the writing little bits of your experiences in Guantanamo that you passed on to the lawyers that eventually became the seed of the book, I believe, right? And so, like, what was the relationship? Was it, were you suspicious of them at first because the government had tried so many different tactics to get people to do things?
You know, when first the lawyers came in 2004, I remember, you know, nobody trusts them basically. They're like, oh, they're lying. Like, why would the American, they want to kill us? But they were interrogator lawyers. So it was really, really like a topic where, because we had no idea, I never been in jail before. I never met any lawyer or court, whatever. So, and I had basically some of us, many of us didn't have any experience. So when the lawyers came, we thought that we never trusted them at the beginning, because why should we? Because we thought they are another interrogators. Especially one of the lawyers told the prisoners, the only way to get out for him to admit for Al-Qaeda, that I can give something. I said, okay, I'm not going to do that. So then with the time, we started, you know, talking to the people who live in the United States or England and so on, and they start building some kind of friendship and trust with the lawyers. But I was never given a lawyer myself until 2009, when Andy Hart, my friend, came, and you know, by the time it was a federal lawyers, the government appointed lawyers for those who didn't have lawyers. So from there, when I have watched our brothers meeting with the lawyers, but there was, I didn't see any rule that the lawyers could do something about our case, because there is no impact. You know, like there is no really result about Guantanamo. It just, and the lawyers were frustrated. So, and the lawyers told the brothers the only way to make public pressure in the media. I said, okay, this is very interesting. And with the time, I was young, but I started learning more about the lawyers, the court system, reading through the material they sent to their clients. And when I met with even when I met with Andy, I told him, look, being a lawyer, I don't think it's going to work. But if you want to become as a friend, come to visit me, I would meet you. If you want to talk about my case. And he said, okay, that's fine. So we started like becoming friends from there. And yeah, at the book, the first time I wrote the book, it was like a draft was taken. The second time I wrote it as letters to my lawyer. It's the only way I get it, because the first draft was confiscated in 2013. It's like they stole my child.
Why did they confiscate it?
Because in 2013, it was the dark age again, because when the army came again, the army wasn't happy about the situation in the camp, the little freedom we have, you know, the TV, the newspaper, they said, you guys you should be you should be treated like you have more rights than the president of the United States. And the problem you are dealing with some of the guards or some of the soldiers who used to work in prison in the United States, one of the armies. So we tried to explain to them that those prisoners have rights. They already been charged, tried, and sentenced. I said, okay, you are most welcome. Try us, give us those rights, and that's fine. But they had their own plan they said, we need to be in control over the camp. Basically, they want to strip all the little thing we have. So also we had our own plan B, but to do that, you need a hammer to strike every head. And I told my brothers, we are not going to do anything. We wait until everyone gets affected. The army started. They made one mistake when they closed Camp 4, and we were in one camp, Camp 6 and Camp 5, and that was our advantage, because they cannot separate us again, because in the past they used to separate us in all the camps. And they started, you know, harassing the prisoners, taking their stuff, confiscating, searching, but we're just waiting, like, for the brothers to react, everyone to get frustrated. In the end, one of the officers came, he again desecrated the Holy Quran, and these like people just react. Again, we went on hunger strike. They shut down the communal living, and we went on force feeding again. And they confiscated all stuff. They destroyed the art. in 2-3 hours, the camp turned to the first worse even than the camp X-ray. Pepper spray, dogs beating, and we took it from there. We were also on hunger strike for like around 30 days. Then they opened the camp living after like 8 months, but it wasn't like as before. So I tried with them to give him my drafts back, the refutes. So I started to write again when I met my lawyer, Antonio Aiello, in 2015. I wrote it as like legal letters. Because they're not allowed to open those letters to Guantanamo. So my lawyer collected those letters, and again, they sent it to Guantanamo to be reviewed, and we get it out. It was like by the end of Obama term, thanks to our case there. And I came to know Mr. Antonio. He's one of the victims of Guantanamo. He's my victim. So basically, after I published my article in the New York Times, he contacted me. Then we started from there.
Maybe you can talk about that, Antonio. What were your first meetings with Mansoor, and how the process of creating this book itself came about?
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting. So Mansoor, I met through his attorney. She got in touch with me after the New York Times piece came out, and it's a small advocacy world. I'd worked on some Guantanamo stuff when I was at Penn, and so I was very familiar with it. And the first meeting with Mansoor, I made the mistake of not having a video, like not doing a video chat. And I remember, we talked, and we got to know each other a little bit. And Mansoor was, he was very nice, but I could tell
he was already outside
of
Guantanamo at this
point. He was in Serbia. He'd been out for I think 2 years. And this was at the peak of like when the Serbian government was really kind of harassing him quite a bit. And I think his life had been turned pretty upside down at that point. And when we talked, I didn't realize that he couldn't see me, and it was a good conversation, but a little bit strange. And then the next time we talked, we were on video chat together, and he blocked, like all of a sudden it was totally different. He was like, "Yeah, I like to see people when I talk to them," and I had no idea that it was a big thing. But after that, like we spent probably a good year going over all of the manuscript. And I think one of the things that I think about with Mansoor and writing the memoir is that, I don't think some people understand the work that went into the memoir on Mansoor's part. Like, he wrote a memoir, which is, a process of processing the trauma that he experienced as a prisoner who was in prison for 14 years without charges. And he processed torture, he processed the community, he processed all these things that happened to him by writing about it. And I think sometimes that process was reliving it. And we would go through these conversations. We'd spend hours on Skype together, and we would get off these calls. He was clearly affected by it. And he would go through periods of just like, I think depression, having had to relive it. And I think it was a difficult thing. So I think writing the book, it was an experience. I mean, we joke that I know a lot about Guantanamo now because I researched so much about it. Like, I took Mansoor and then I researched everything else. And so sometimes I feel like I spent a lot of time there, but it'll never be, comparable to Mansoor. But I think, it was an eye opener. And I always say that when I first started working with Mansoor, I thought I knew a lot about Guantanamo because I had done so much work in the advocacy area. And I thought I knew, like, I worked on FOIA requests. I'd worked with the ACLU and Penn. Like, I knew what there was to know about it, but I'd never known what it was like to individually be in Guantanamo. And I think this is one of the things that was so important about Mansoor's story, is that you get to see what it was like for a person who was 18 years old to come of age in prison for without having ever been charged with a crime, and being accused of being associated with one of the worst terrorist attacks, a country had faced. And so it's a huge thing. Anyway, so that.
Yeah. Mansoor, what do you think that the United States owes you?
United States owes a lot of people, not just me. I wish just, as power, as the United States country, they could do a lot of good other than I mean, they have done good things, but also the damage they have been done, not just to me or to like millions of people. And, you know, I wish, you know, for me, like it's already happened, but I wish things will be better in the future. And I wish none of that would happen to anyone. And, you know, for me, I could move. It takes me, maybe it's still going to take some time to move, but acknowledgement for everyone, you know, that what happened, not just about Guantanamo, there be some kind of accountability. That the problem, these things keep happening because there is no kind of accountability. People, nobody was held accountable what happened either in Vietnam or in Iraq or in Guantanamo and black sites. That means the cycle will keep happening, and this is sad. And I'm not talking about myself, you know, because I'm just one of the many. And there should be accountability, acknowledgement, and also compensation. And if the United States, I'm talking about the government, not the people, because honestly, I can tell you that most people who was calling for the closure of Guantanamo are Americans, and most people who are actually fighting for the closure of Guantanamo are Americans, because there is like a dead silence from the international community. Anyway, I think if the United States wants to close the Guantanamo chapter, there should be kind of acknowledgement, apologizing to those humans, and accountability for what happened there. That's at least.
Is there
I don't
something
think-
that you would recommend that we as Americans do? This is, I think, actually piggybacking on a question that was just
Yeah, I mean, like, you know, Guantanamo is not about, it's not about us. If they could create Guantanamo outside the United States, the same people would create it inside the United States with new rules and legislations and so on. So it's not just as before. It's not about the prisoners, about Guantanamo. It's about us all as humans. It just, when there is some kind of accountability and people hold accountable, people will rethink doing it again. Because trust me, some of the interrogators who torture prisoners in Vietnam, they came to interrogate us and torture us at Guantanamo.
Wow.
So basically, yeah, there should be some kind of accountability. But as we see now, for the last 21 years, and there's no like a serious step to close the prison, and we are asking for justice. You know, if anyone committing a crime or charged a crime, they should be held accountable. They should be charged, be sentenced. We're not asked to release everyone. No, we are asking for justice. Even like at Guantanamo, when we used to protest, we asked them, okay, if they accuse us that we want to destroy the American justice system. I said, look, try us before your own justice system. But the truth is that American justice system need justice, because that system have been misused and abused for decades.
We're starting to get a good number of questions, I think, in the chat. And also, I invite people in the audience in front of me here to think of their questions. Just raise your hand and I'll acknowledge you. But before we just move to the questions, I think there's another question that might also be on people's minds, which is, you're currently in Serbia, but maybe people don't understand why you are in Serbia. Can you tell us about how you got to Serbia, and maybe a little bit about what life post Guantanamo is like?
You know, when we said Guantanamo upside down world, it's upside down world. You know, I was brought there. I didn't know why, or as I told you, we didn't know until when we're going to stay or for what. When I was released from Guantanamo, the same thing. They told me you had no choice, and you were going to leave because this was the end of Obama era, and he said they tried to release as many detainees as they could. So the rules was, if anyone accepted by any country, he would be sent there regardless, whether like it or not. So I was sent to Serbia against my will, because I was honestly afraid of Serbia, and I've got like many people, prisoners, and even campus staff don't go there and so on. So I said, okay, I'm not going there, but I had no choice. You know, the deal between the United States and the hosting country should be like a resettlement agreement. That what they told us, that at least, but we had no idea. We didn't see what agreement between the United States and the hosting countries. Of course, those countries have some kind of like a budget for housing, healthcare, education, and so on. But when we arrived in those countries, especially before I left Guantanamo, I was following the cases that have been released, like to Kazakhstan, Slovakia, Albania. And, you know, there was like really sad stories. And I told my lawyer, I don't want to go to those countries. I would like to go to other Arab countries or to Western Europe, but you had no choice. When you arrived here, I was told you have only 2 years to live here under restrictions. You have no rights. And it was what? So then we have to fight again, you know, start again, like we haven't left Guantanamo, we live in Guantanamo 2.0. So since I got out, my lawyer came here many times, went to the media, I went on hunger strike twice. And there was a lot of, at the beginning, there was a lot of her. I didn't want to scare Anna or Edward here. Hi, Edward. So there was a lot of harassment by the police. If I met anyone or get contact with them, they would be harassed by the police, calling for interrogation and so on. And I was arrested a few times, interrogated, and I tell them, look, either like, let me live like a free person or send me back to Guantanamo. I'm not going to stop because I'm not doing anything wrong. You know, the beginning they used threats, they tried to put me in jail. You had got, I said, I don't care. To be honest with you, I came from the worst places. And my lawyer came here a few times. And things get improved, alhamdulillah, but still like uncertainty there from time to time. And, you know, there's worst cases with prisoners like released to the United Arab Emirates, where they spent 5 years in jail. Kazakhstan, where there is prisoners, they have no INICA legal status for the last 8 years, no family visits, no wives. Their wives are not allowed to visit. Albania, people live there without any kind like legal status too. They are not allowed to have any kind of ID. They're not allowed to work. And the problem is when Trump took over, the State Department closed that office that should monitor the released cases. And when Trump came, he also said he would keep going to Guantanamo open. And, you know, Serbian government told me, okay, Trump is in power now, everything has changed. And it was scary. Every time it's scary because we live in uncertainty, you know, anything can happen at any time. But alhamdulillah, I tried as much as I can to finish my education, and with the help, many people help me and support me. And I have Anna, our friend today, she has visited me a few times, met her with her family, and they have been very supportive, alhamdulillah. So also, since I got out, I have been doing a lot of activism for the closure of Guantanamo, also for the released prisoners to follow their cases, try to help as much as we can. And last month, I went on a bike ride for the first time in 20 years. I rode for like 400 kilometers of the closure of Guantanamo. And inshallah, you guys are invited for next year. We are planning to do like a group ride. So we are also planning for really big camping in Cuba for the 21st anniversary of the opening of Guantanamo. Like it's called the Prisoner's Return. I am actually the leading project of this, so I'm planning all of that to have like international camping in Cuba, in the United States, in England, in other countries to make it like really big camping for the closure of Guantanamo.
Very interesting. Thank you, Mansoor, and thank you for your extraordinary generosity for sharing all of your stories with us as well. I haven't been able to review the questions. Anna, do you have any? Do you want to jump in or?
Yeah, sure. I'll start with the first one. Kim
Okay.
Torres says, do you plan on writing another book about life post Guantanamo? Let's start there.
Yeah, it's just here. I have to go to this behind me. Please, you have to talk to Antonio to finish the book proposal so we can get it sooner. Actually, yeah, since I got out, I have been, you know, writing everything. Not just about me, it's about life after Guantanamo in general, about me, about the prison, about the world, about everything that life after Guantanamo. So basically, what behind me really, it's the book Life After Guantanamo. It is here.
That's great.
Do you or Antonio want to talk a little bit more about other projects? I know we read a little bit in your bios at the beginning of our time, but for anyone who was late or for anything that you want to sort of expand on, what are other types of projects that y'all are working on, either the two of you together or Mansoor for you, especially collectively, with other former detainees or just networks of folks who are doing a lot of advocacy and organizing around Guantanamo closure? You shared some, but maybe you'd like to go into some more detail.
I will take the lead to Antonio. Go ahead.
Well, I'll just quickly talk about things that we're working on, then you can take it to the collective activism that you're doing. So I think the important thing for me is how to get Mansoor's story and the story of Guantanamo and how this happened into as many mediums and platforms as possible. So in addition to the book, we're finishing up an Audible series that will be, it's called Letters from Guantanamo, and it's meant to, it's kind of like the same story as the book, but it's told in letters. It's an epistolary told in letters written out of Guantanamo to the world outside. And Mansoor was a prolific letter writer, and a lot of those letters were lost, but it tells the story in letters through to like Abdullah de la Salle, the president of Yemen, the king of Jordan, to space aliens, to the founding fathers with questions about the Constitution, to Martin Luther King. So it's not only kind of provocative, but it tells the story, and I think presents it in a way that I think connects the dots for people who don't want to sit down with a book and read about it. We're also doing a TV show that's in development that will hopefully get produced, go into production soon. We have a great team of producers who are working on it with us, and with that, I think with every project, it's to try and pivot away from what we know about Guantanamo. And I think there are some established facts that I think we can just take for granted now, which is that torture happened, that Guantanamo was a bad place and extrajudicial. And what we want people to know is that within that place that had torture, that wasn't the only thing that happened. This was a place where people had lives. There were husbands and brothers and uncles and fathers and grandfathers, and they had dreams and hopes and love, and they survived. And we want people to know the story about the men that lived there, not just the prisoners, but the lives that were destroyed of the guards, and the questionable ethics and morals that people had to carry out in order to make Guantanamo happen and keep it open. So those are a couple of the things that we have going, and we've done graphic narratives. I think the key is to people have short attention span, and people have different ways of absorbing and understanding stories. And so we're trying to reach as many people as possible through different outlets and different means of telling story. And that's it. And then Mansoor is always doing stuff with other things. So do you want to talk about the other projects and other things you have going on, Mansoor?
There is also a friend of mine. She reached out. She wanted to do a theater, immersive theater about Guantanamo. We are actually still talking about the idea. I'm also planning, like, trying to do I'm trying to do like a documentary about art from Guantanamo. What is really important to do this kind of documentary, just about focus on art at Guantanamo, about what the role of art at surviving at Guantanamo. Other than this, Guantanamo is still open. We're still fighting for the call for detention. I doing sometimes some writing, some speaking engagements, students who have like their own theses, whatever, just learn as much as I can. And this is our rule. And my room, I live in one room, it's like Guantanamo lab, basically. And any of you need anything about Guantanamo, we are most welcome at any time.
I think another question that seems to be coming up is whether people who left Guantanamo were ever compensated for their experiences. And I think that's a clear answer. In fact, the other countries were compensated, not the people themselves.
No, there is I think only Canada,
right.
England,
and
England, that people get their compensation. Other countries, no, we are being punished for being at Guantanamo.
And in fact, it's sort of an unknown or unacknowledged fact, is it not, that the countries that are the third-party repatriated countries receive some kind of support from the US government to accept the people coming from Guantanamo. So in fact, the countries get something from it, but such as Serbia, but the people themselves get nothing from it, essentially, by and large.
Yes, I mean, if you are lucky, you move to a country where like Oman, Qatar, Germany, or Ireland, you are lucky there because economically those countries doing well, and they in their best interest those prisoners. Because last year I finished my thesis, my bachelor degree was about rehabilitation and reintegration of former Guantanamo detainees into social life and labor market. And I researched all those countries about their life, their integration to the society, and why those prisoners managed to become productive members, move on with their life, and what's the reason in other countries prisoners couldn't do the same. And mostly because the hosting countries where some of them were very supportive, they want prisoners to be integrated, so they support them. Basically, if the country does not support you, because you've spent 10, 15 years totally broken in every way in your life, and if there is no kind of support until you kind of stand on your feet, it's hard to move on. And if you leave Guantanamo, face the same challenges and difficulties, it's kind of really hard and difficult. Yes.
Professor Bayoumi, do you mind if oh, sorry, Antonio.
No, I think it's important. I see in kind of similar themes on the questions, but I think it's important to understand that there's not going to be compensation for the prisoners who are there, or any sort of, I think, uptick in care for them until there's a sense of accountability that the United States actually did this. And I think, what people can do, and I think it's important that, like, the biggest hurdles for getting accountability for Guantanamo and for compensating people and for closing it is electing congressmen and women to actually vote for legislation that would do that. And I think the biggest hurdle has been Congress. Obama signed an executive order his first day in office to close Guantanamo. Congress passed legislation to make it impossible to move men outside of Guantanamo. They defunded all efforts to close Guantanamo. So again, like, what you can do is you can make sure that the leaders that we elect don't get elected through using fear and intimidation and false narratives about terrorists to pass legislation that keeps it open, and that forces them to have accountability. I think that's a big part of this.
Relevant comment on the eve of a big election tomorrow.
Right.
So everyone take heed. But I'm going to offer maybe for folks to, especially Mansoor and Antonio, if you have Twitter handles, Instagram, Facebook, and other ways in which the folks on this call can follow you, maybe drop that in the chat and we can disseminate it also in a follow-up email to all the participants here, maybe folks who wanted to attend but weren't able to. And I just wanted to actually ask Professor Bayoumi, I understand that you were actually most recently on at Guantanamo. And so I'm hoping that maybe we can just sort of connect some of the dots here. And maybe if you don't mind, just sharing briefly what you found and what that means 21 years on, both in terms of what we find today and its development and evolution, but also what that means for any kind of future action towards kind of closing the camp. And also to piggyback, if that's okay, off someone's question in the chat, why Cuba of all places?
Sure. Well, the United States has a long colonial relationship essentially with Cuba that the Cuban Revolution ruptured. And so in 1903, the U.S. government and the Cuban government at the time, which was basically a proxy for the U.S. government, signed a naval base agreement, and it would take both of them to agree to dissolve that agreement at any moment in history, which is just never going to happen. You won't get both sides at this point ever agreeing to that. So that means that there's this naval base. It's in fact the oldest overseas base in the U.S. Arsenal that exists. It's 40 square miles, all on the sort of southeastern tip of Cuba. And what's interesting is that when you fly to Guantanamo, as I did, because I went as a journalist to cover the military commissions that were happening there at the time and are continuing to happen. When you fly there, you fly in a chartered plane from Andrews Air Force Base, Joint Base Andrews in Maryland, as a big group. You're coming in with the trial judiciary, the judge. You're coming in with the prosecution. You're coming in with the defense counsel. All of the journalists and observers. They're all on the same plane, and then we fly all the way down. And you take this really long route around the big island of Cuba so that you can come up from the south. So you're not actually going to be going over Cuban airspace at all. And then you land on the base, and then you go from one side of the base to the other via boat. And then you're still kept very far away from what's called JTF Guantanamo, which is the prison itself, because there is the naval station and there's the prison. And basically there's where the prison itself is, there's less and less access to journalists these days. Since 2019, it's harder and harder to get anywhere close to that. But at the same time, there is access to the military commissions, though they're spending millions of dollars to open a second courtroom so that they can have two trials going on at the same time for the military commissions. And that second trial that they were opening now, the second courtroom, initially, they did not want to actually even have press seating in that courtroom. So they were making it less and less available for people to actually view this in person. Their argument was, well, we'll just do it via closed circuit, and people can go in at some, hot spots in the U.S. to watch it. And then many different journalistic organizations sued the government and said it's not the same. We have to be able to see it in person at the same time. And so they eventually relented. But at the same time, they're also, as we speak, they're building barracks for more permanent barracks for 850 guards currently in Guantanamo. And yet, at the same token, too, we are seeing slowly, there are more people getting released. So we just had another person who was released relatively recently. So that's, both things are happening at the same time. As regards to the military commissions themselves, they are, in some senses, a kind of farce. They're almost like a circus show. And it actually, when I came back to the U.S., I kind of realized how much of a traveling circus it actually is, because we're all getting on that same plane, like I was describing, and then we're going down. Everybody's performing a role, and then we pack it up, and then we all just come back to the United States, except, of course, the people who are in Guantanamo. So it's this traveling circus for this captive audience that is going to remain in captivity. And it's a very strange, the rules are not clear, and the rules are very much designed in order to, in fact, hide accountability, especially for the kinds of actions and torturous actions, particularly that the CIA took during the times that they had these men in black sites. So it's this weird sort of mixture, and at one point the Military Commissions Act, which established this separate part of the legal sphere where this thing is happening, first passed in 2006 and then was essentially declared unconstitutional, so it had to go back in 2009. There have been many different sort of legal problems with just establishing this legal system, because really, why do we have so many separate legal systems? There should be one legal system, and that we can judge people all for their actions upon it. So yeah, that's a very brief answer, I guess, to your question. Yeah, but I also want to see if we have any questions here from our audience as well, while we have a couple of minutes left. Don't be shy. Yes, Lawrence, please.
I think as I listen to the presentation, I feel like Guantanamo is the good pattern of violence and colonial power.
Mm-hmm.
And the question I want to ask him, if fighting terrorism and bringing democracy are two components of the new age of imperialism, it creates its own humanitarian crisis without having to answer. As a victim of a mistake, did you try to bring the matter in court, like the UN International Court?
Mm-hmm.
Or for violating your rights? That's what I
Mm-hmm.
And the second question I can ask him is, he said at one point something about the art class he had.
Mm-hmm.
But that class can be a way for the ruler to read his mind,
Mhm.
his consciousness.
Mhm.
And the question I can ask him is, did you think that the art class was more helpful to him
Mhm.
than it was for the music?
Okay, great, thank you. I'm not sure if you heard the question, so maybe I should just quickly repeat them. There were two questions there. I'll start with the second one because I remember it more clearly first. And that was in the art classes that you were taking, the art classes clearly were valuable for people who were performing the art and being able to have the art. But at the same time, was it also a way for the structure to be able to see inside the minds of the detainees themselves because they're creating this kind of artwork? And so is there a sort of surveillance aspect almost to the art and control aspect to the art classes? That was one question. And the second question was, there's a pattern of violence in colonial situations that Guantanamo also seems to replicate. And is there a possibility, or have you or other people from Guantanamo considered going to international courts to for redress and for justice, such as within the United Nations network or other kinds of networks? I hope that's a fair representation. Okay.
Okay, first about art from Guantanamo. People forget the fact that we grew up at Guantanamo. We actually the children of Guantanamo, because we end up like they're really, some of us really young. And imagine like 15 years or 20 years now, you grew up in that place. So, but also, of course, arts sometimes kind of window to people minds and souls and so on. But at that time, we didn't thought about that. We just went, like, there is a period of time we tried to prove our humanity to everyone. Like because being stripped of your humanity, of you who you are, you try always to tell the people, I am that kind of person. I'm a human. I'm not a terrorist. I'm not a killer. I'm not that criminal you think. So that we started forming like people who treat us more human, like lawyers and others. We become like, okay, these are our friends. We have a strong friendship with them. Through arts, we tried also to connect to ourselves, to our memories, to our emotion, to the world outside. It was the idea. Later on, we tried also to tell people that this is who we are. There was restrictions to what we could draw at Guantanamo. We're not allowed to, something which jeopardized the camp security or wherever. But also the process of approving art, if it is like some of the art would get destroyed if the government or doesn't like it. And the government themselves, they started the art gallery at Guantanamo. When we started our gallery or our exhibition after in 2017 in New York, it became a big problem for the government. As for the second question about suing the US government, actually, we are not allowed to come to the United States or to sue the US government in the American justice system. It's like very funny. When I was talking to my lawyer, she said, you're not allowed to sue the government or anyone from the George W. Bush administration or so on. In the international courts, we haven't tried, and I'm not aware if anyone have been tried to do that, but I'm sure it will be hard and difficult, but I haven't looked into that.
Yeah. And I'll just, if I can just jump in on the kind of criminal justice aspect, and also kind of how Guantanamo has changed the legal landscape, not just in the United States, but just I think internationally. I think one thing that struck me, having worked in the prison arena in education for a while, is how the United States used incarceration to really isolate a population and punish it, and use, like, incarceration was an act of punishment and not an act of rehabilitation. And I think the crimes that were committed and that were used to put people in prison is kind of a way for the United States and certain power structures to act with impunity. And I think that was carried over quite a bit to Guantanamo. And that sense of impunity the fact that Guantanamo still remains open after 21 years without any sense of accountability, that men are still being held there, and that even experts who were the architects of opening Guantanamo admit that only 75% of what happened at Guantanamo is known and will probably ever be known, kind of speaks to the fact of how Guantanamo was used internationally. So I saw somebody mention that they had relatives taken into custody in Turkey. Well, I think, you know, the Uyghurs are being held in detention camps in China. I think Ukrainian citizens and prisoners of war are being held in Russia. Detention camps were used in the United States for immigrants. And I think it's a way, I think what the United States has done is create a model that can be used around the world for extrajudicial detention without a sense of accountability. And we've used that by creating these very strange categories of undefinable people who are being detained, whether they're illegal immigrants or aliens, whether they're enemy combatants, whether they're terrorists. But we've created this kind of limbo gray land where anything can happen to these people without a sense of accountability. And I think that's a new place that is really a product of Guantanamo. And without reconciling with Guantanamo, it's going to continue to happen and be used even more widespread.
I think that we have already, I believe, run out of time. So let me just say that I'm incredibly thankful to all of you for coming, and to Antonio, and especially to Mansoor. And I also just want to say that you know, I've watched a bunch of the different events that have taken place with former detainees from Guantanamo Bay, and I'm always so impressed with the capacity for forgiveness and the capacity for life and for moving forward. And so I just really think that we should acknowledge that. And I see in the chat that somebody's saying we need more love, the world needs more love, and we need both love and justice. So, and those two things really work hand in hand. And so hopefully today was one small step towards that journey. So thank you all for coming. Thank you very much. And you probably will be hearing from us again at some point, as we will send you an email about the event and where the links and things like that may be. So thank you all.
Yeah, thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
Professor
Thanks.
Bayoumi.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for being here, both.
Yalla, assalamu alaikum.
Nah, so then.